Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome, 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 and happy 2022. Happy 2022. Happy New Year to all of you. It is wonderful to see you coming in. Do shout out for us in the chat where you're coming from. How's your New Year been so far? It's awesome to gather here together in still the early part of January. My name is Dr. Shamini Jain. I'm the founder and CEO of the Consciousness and Healing Initiative. And we are absolutely thrilled to bring leaders in healing to you every month during these webinars on healing, where we learn about the best of the science and the best of healing practice from leaders in the field. We're so grateful that you've come to join us here live. It's wonderful. And for those of you who will be watching the replay later, welcome. And thank you for tuning in. Do let us know where you're coming from. I see San Jose, I see Long Beach, Chino Hills, a lot of Californians today, Seattle, Brooklyn, Colombia, Napa, fabulous. Ibiza, Spain, yes, Portland, my goodness, Portugal. This is amazing. Thank you, worldwide community. I hope your 2022 has been going very well, that everyone has been keeping Yucatan, fabulous, that you've been keeping healthy and in good spirit. And, you know, while we're all navigating the unknown and the continued pandemic, that even if you haven't been feeling great, that you've been keeping in good spirit as much as possible. It is my honor and pleasure to have our guest for this January webinar 2022, Grace Sesma, curandera, part of the Chi Healing Practitioners Council and lifelong educator with us. And Grace is going to bring us in together in ceremony before we begin. Grace, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, Shami, thank you so much for inviting me to be with you, to be in circle with everyone who's just joining us. And I want to acknowledge that I am coming to you from the land of the Arapaho relatives, Lakota relatives, Cheyenne, and Ute peoples in Colorado. And I appreciate all the guardians who have welcomed me into this beautiful land up here in the Rockies. I'm just lighting some sage and some tobacco so that we can start our plática in a good way with prayers and setting the intention for our time together to be one that is good for everyone, that is a blessing for everyone. And so, Creator, grandmothers and grandfathers of the four directions, to all you good doctor spirits and all you good spirits in nature, I offer you this sacred medicine in gratefulness for this day and gratefulness for our life, gratefulness for this beautiful plant medicine. May it flow out to the four directions to bless all those who are joining us today or who will be joining us later through this recording. I call upon your wisdom and your strong spiritual protection for all of us here. Call upon all of our ancestors that they may stand behind us, they may guide us. May they surround us with their love. May their wisdom flow through us. May their good medicine power flow through us to heal ourselves and each other. I thank you for this opportunity to be in this plática with my relatives. And I ask that this conversation, that this sharing of ours be a blessing to all of you who are listening, all of you who have joined us. I thank you, Creator, for all these blessings and the blessings yet to come. And I offer these blessings for all our relatives in nature, for all our guardians, for all of our ancestors, for all of us present and all those yet to come. Chakutusea, Yehan. Thank you for joining me in your heart with those prayers too.
Thank you, Grace. What a beautiful way to start off our first webinar of 2022 with that very, very graceful and beautiful prayer. Thank you. It's an honor to have you with us to talk about Curanderismo. And sadly, though we are on native land, many of us don't really know what it is, right? Some of us joining may have some familiarity, but others may not. So maybe we can start at the very beginning, which is if someone who knows nothing about Curanderismo comes to you and asks you, what is this that you practice? And how is it that you found yourself to become a curandera? How would you answer that?
Well, so I don't know whether to start with my personal story of how I got on
Please.
this path, because it's really long. So I'm going to have to try and abbreviate it. Otherwise, we will go into 2 or 3 hours for this talk. My calling to walk this path of curanderismo came through my dreams as a very young child. And the earliest dream that I remember is probably when I was 6 or 7, and I was asleep. And we come from a very humble family. I was born in Mexicali, Baja California, the capital of Baja California, and probably one of the top 3 poorest communities. So it was very rich in love, but we're very quite poor. My parents built their casita out of adobe themselves, and it was filled with love and laughter and the presence of extended family. Most of my aunts and uncles lived within a couple of blocks of each other. And so I was exposed to curanderismo. Not that I knew that it was called that. In those days, it was just, our family practicing certain cultural rituals that helped keep us healthy. And we used to talk about dreams, but again, it was something that's very normal, very natural. It's nothing like perhaps that we read in books. And so we consider ourselves to be a very much of a dreaming family. Mm-hmm. And when I was 6 or 7, I had to roll out a little cot that my sister and I shared. And I was fast asleep, but I was aware that this beautiful woman walked into the room, and she came over to the cot and she extended her hand to me. And she said, "Mijita, will you come with me?" And she was beautiful. So I said yes. And she lifted me out of the cot. Of course, that was my spiritual body. Mm-hmm. And we walked out of our house. And it seemed that I walked into a carriage of some sort. She sat to my left, and I kept looking up at her because she was just so beautiful. And she was wearing a rebozo. She was wearing it over her head. And as she was speaking to me, what I recall even now is the mystery of seeing pinpoints of light in her rebozo like stars. Her rebozo was a beautiful dark indigo, and I think it was the night sky, and it was the stars that her rebozo was adorned with. So she was adorned with the night sky. And I don't recall her words verbatim. I just remember that she asked me if I would accept what she was going to ask me to do, if I would say yes, if I would follow her instructions.
And you were 7 years old at this time?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And this is all happening in the dream, in the dream time, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Wow.
And I remember her talking to me, and I kept going like, okay, yes, of course, okay. And just knowing in my heart that I had to say yes. I don't remember, again, what she asked me to do, but I knew that it had to do with my life. And as I grew older, that stuck with me. And I knew that somehow that would unfold.
Wow.
You know?
That's so beautiful.
And so for me, that was the first call to walk on this path. And as I got older, more assimilated, I didn't want to be on this path. I had seen one of my aunties who was a curandera for our neighborhood, how much she worked. She worked very hard. She was very humble. I don't recall her charging people, but I knew that it was a very arduous path, and I didn't want to do this. I got married at age 16, divorced at 19, so I had 2 daughters to support, and I didn't feel that I would be able to support my family by turning to the medicine. But through a series of dreams of grandmothers coming to see me in the dream time, giving me teachings, chastising me, I was forced to walk on this path eventually. Because they told me that if I didn't, I would lose my job. I had a well-paying job at the time, and that I would lose everything.
My.
And I tried to negotiate with them over the years, and finally there came a time when they said, "No, you need to start learning this." And so I decided to just hold off a little bit more on that. And before I knew it, at that time, I was the administrator for a psychiatric partial hospitalization program. And the hospital closed down, and I was out of work for a few months. I was unable to make my mortgage payment or my car payment, so I lost everything.
Wow.
It was a terrible, terrible time. And then I got a dream and said, if you walk this path, the medicine, not Reiki or those other things, but the medicine, you will always be taken care of. And so I said, okay. And within a month, I had work, and I was introduced to elders that began guiding me in this reality. So that's a very abbreviated version of how I came to walk this path. And that was over a course, obviously, of many, many years, of several decades.
Thank you so much for sharing even this abbreviated story with us, because first of all, it's so beautiful, and second, does remind me of the healer's calling, and often many healers that I have met have related somewhat similar stories of the calling, and sometimes the reluctance, in the beginning to follow that calling, and, clear messages sometimes, as you received, of this is what's going to happen. This is why you need to do it. This is just part of who you are and your purpose. And I so appreciate you sharing the story, because I think it's so important. As you know, we live in a very Western world where there are many things that are commercially available to us, right? Many ways of teaching healing, framing healing. And these ways, and the ways in particular, let's say of Curanderismo, the calling to be a curandera is a little bit different, say, than taking a weekend workshop, for example. It's a totally different process. Yes. So let's take a kind of a perspective here, so that we all really understand what is curanderismo, and how might it be similar or different from some of the healing traditions that we see in the modern world. Maybe they're not as different, maybe there's some similarities, but any way that you would like to describe, what curanderismo really is.
Curanderismo is very culture specific. It's specific to Mexican culture, at least my practice. And it incorporates aspects of native cultures of Mexico. Today, many curandera apprentices are also bringing in some northern native traditions, because they're very similar. Some of our practices are very similar. Our prayers are similar. The practice of our pláticas, our heart-to-heart conversations, that aspect of what we call counseling, is part of most native healing traditions as well.
Mm.
We use, of course, feathers. We use our songs. We use other um, other traditional sacred tools. But curanderismo as a whole is seen as an interwoven practice of bringing people back to their inherent wellness and balance. And it sounds like, oh yeah, this is what we're going to do, and it's like almost magic, but that's not my intention. Healing takes time. It is a journey. And so a lot of people, I think of curanderismo, native healing practices, as something that's magical or that is going to happen overnight after a limpia. But for many people, it's a process. It's a journey. We're like an onion. We're peeling and unpeeling layers. And then there's the energy component. We call it spiritual healing. Some people call it energy healing. It's similar, except that I think for practitioners of strictly energy healing, they may look at it as very scientific, and it doesn't have the spiritual, religious underpinning that our tradition has. For us, creator, our connection to creator, our connection to the land, our relationship with plants, our relationships with certain of our tools, we nurture that relationship, our relationship with each other. We're a team versus one person.
I love that. Yeah. Is it safe to say that Curanderismo, similar to other traditions and other cultures, come from a cosmology of connection, so that we recognize, like you say, we're not alone. It's not just you, the curandera. You're like an agent. You're connected to creator. You're connected to ancestral lineage of helping guides and spirits, these types of things, yours and the person you're working with. So there is an interaction that's taking place. And that restoration, as you said, of that inner wellness is also that sense of harmony with oneself and one's, relatives, and, meaning the relatives of the earth as well.
Yes, that's right.
And
exactly.
all beings. Yeah. All beings. Yeah. It's such a beautiful, beautiful system. So you, as you mentioned, system isn't even the right word, in other words, and I apologize, it's a terrible word, it's a scientific term.
Yeah, that's for ease of communication, but yeah.
It's a beautiful way, really, is probably a better way to describe it. And you described your own calling. So now, you practice this, you've been practicing this for decades, and you've been teaching people and you work with people. What do you look for, in a student, if someone wants to learn curanderismo and become a curandera, for example? How does that process work?
Well, it's to become a formal apprentice is very arduous for both the student and the teacher, because the teacher is a mirror. My primary elder was a mirror for me of both what people might say is the shadow, as well as the gifts that have been given to me. And it's a process. It's a relationship building. So we both have to be patient with each other. The student has to be patient with themselves. They have to be willing to work through relationship issues with the teacher. They have to be willing to hear no and act on a no. In the Western way, most people are not used to receiving a no. May I excuse myself for just a moment? I'm seeing that there's a problem with the connection. I'm going to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Do what you need to do. And in the meantime, while you're doing that, I'll just chat with our group here, our audience. Thank you all again for being with us. We've got so many of you coming from all over the world, while Grace is just making sure that her power is set up well on the computer. I noticed some wonderful comments and things in chat. If you're new to us, we will be having some time for you to ask Grace some questions about Curanderismo and her process as a curandera. And we're going to be sharing some practices and things as well today. But if you do have a question for Grace, if you're joining us here on Zoom, just look to the bottom of your screen and you'll see a button that says Q&A. I want you to just press that button and type in your question, and we will get to them toward the end of the hour so that you can have a few questions with Grace. And, you know, if we're lucky, we'll get to have her back, of course, to share even more wisdom. She is part of our Healing Practitioners Council for the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, which is sponsoring our webinar here today. So do go ahead and put your questions in the chat if you'd like to ask a question later. Grace, you're all good? You're connected?
Yes, yes, it was just kind of wobbly. So now it's back on, so I feel more comfortable. And I was beginning to wonder what was going on. But so let's go back to what we were talking about, the student relation, what I look for in a student. So for me, it's really important that we have a spiritual connection. I dreamed of all of my teachers before I ever met them. My teachers dreamed of me. So that, I mean, not that that has to happen, but I'm using that as an example of a strong spiritual connection. So there, we have to feel there's a spiritual connection. Also, I think it's really important for students or people who want to learn from any teacher to look at their background, you know, be respectful, but ask questions. Are they ethical? How do they carry themselves? Are they walking their talk? That's really important to me. What are their ethics? What are their values? How do they treat their students? It's one thing, like some of my students say, es regañona, like you're like someone who's scolding. I do it out of love because I want them to do well. I want them to be better than me. I think that's the goal of most teachers, is that you hope that the people that you're sharing with your medicine with, that they're going to be much better than you. So, you know, and that's also part of a test, I think, for students. If I say, no, you can't do this, and they behave inappropriately, that tells me that they lack discipline. And so they have to work on the discipline. I had to learn that discipline.
So humility, discipline, integrity, all these things are crucial. A willingness to come into relationship with you and grow. And it sounds like, yeah, there is some shadow work that is going to come up in this process, that people have to be ready to go through that. And as you say, lead with, I'm hearing a lot of humility, discipline and integrity in the process. And I love how you noted that in this tradition, in your tradition, that understanding the no of the teacher and really trusting in the guidance of a teacher. You know, in our tradition, we talk about gurus, and that, you know, it to some degree has a bad name, you know, in the Western world, especially, and in the world generally, because of so-called false gurus. You know, just as an aside, I had a good friend once that said, you know what guru means to me? G-U-R-U, right? G, you are you. Because a guru's place is to lead you back to your essence, right? And that is what I'm hearing from you as well, is that you have to, there's a sense of trust and surrender too in the guide, right? That they have a curandera that is training with you will have to have that trust and faith in you as well to guide through the process.
Yes. And you know, every teacher is different. So I'm not as tough a teacher so far as my elders have been with me, because I don't see many persons who are really willing to discover certain things about the medicine and the training. I think they would be very fearful. They might misunderstand certain things. So I still look at that, and you have to adapt to your student. And so, and also, not everyone is supposed to be a curandera or a curandero. And I'd like to say that even though I use the binary curandero and curandera, I include all my relatives of the spectrum and their gender identity when I use those words.
Thank you for
Um,
naming that.
so,
Yeah, that
okay,
is,
yeah.
sorry, please.
No, so as one example, my elder, one time we were going on pilgrimage and had a big group. And I was standing about halfway down the block with his daughter. And she and I were just laughing and not really paying attention when all of a sudden I felt someone's energy hand reach into my heart and give it a little bit of a squeeze. And so immediately I started putting up my defenses and thinking like, who is this? And then I recognized the energetic signature as my elders. And I looked and he was at the other corner. He had his arms crossed and he's looking at me with this like disgust. Because I am supposed to always be aware of my surroundings. I'm supposed to be aware of my energy and my energetic boundaries. And so that's a really hard lesson. And he applied those kind of lessons to other people on that trip. And when they came back, they never returned to spend time with him.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that experience. And you mentioned that it's not for everyone, right? So you may be interested in this and you may support it, but
Yeah.
that's different from doing it. And there is something about, what you call being a good relative. And you've talked about that. You've even, given classes on what it means to be a good relative. How do you become a good relative? So tell us about that. Why did you do a class on being a good relative? And what does it mean to be a good relative?
To me, to be a good relative, first of all, there has to be mutual respect. There has to be reciprocity. There has to be a sense of that what happens to me is going to happen to you. A blessing for me is a blessing for you. What harms me harms you. That's part of being a good relative in general. But the way when I talk about this in the class that I do, it's a little bit farther. It's more for the non-native people or native Mexican people who have been removed from cultural ways because of colonization. And so we have to come back to learn what that means for us. So being a good relative to me, if you're not of my culture, means respecting my protocols, respecting our boundaries. You don't grasp at teachings and cultural rituals just because you have that you can. You don't take without asking, as happens a lot, unfortunately. There's a lot of people out there who feel that cultural practices like Curanderismo and Native American medicines ways are there at their disposal and they're entitled to the teachings. And because elders have been kind and compassionate and have shared teachings with them, without spending more time with these elders, they decide to set themselves up as shaman, as teachers. And there's instances of people that who I have met, that have exploited the teachings that they've received. They've trademarked it and changed some things, but they're clearly very culture-specific teachings. And they make a lot of money catering to the needs of people who feel a void in their spiritual life. And that to me is theft. It's part of the ongoing genocide of our culture. Some people don't do it maliciously. It's not malicious, it's ignorance, because no one has told them that it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to tell you that it's wrong, and I want to tell you why it's wrong. I want to share with you how to do things right, how to go beyond just offering a land acknowledgement, for example, to be a good ally. how to determine what's the difference between native medicine ways and the protocols, such as not charging for healing. For most native nations, you don't charge for healing, but we see people who are charging $500 an hour for healing. So this medicine is for the people. It's not supposed to be exploited and desacralized. And that is what happens when people don't have the experience and haven't been taught about our collective history in the Americas, about European colonization, of the murder of millions of Native peoples. I hope that after they attend this class that they will respect the teachings, that they will respect the sacrifice that many of our ancestors did make in preserving and our traditions and hiding some of our cosmology, so that today we can still put it together and be able to reconnect with our cultural ways and to revitalize our language. These are all things that a lot of people don't seem to know. I've had conversations with very kind-hearted people who call themselves shaman and disagree with me that they are stealing cultural practices from Native nations because they've gone through courses that they get a certificate for. And so when I ask them, okay, so break down what you're doing. Tell me where you got this practice. Can you tell me to whose nation this belongs? Where did this originate, what you're doing? They don't know. They just know they went to a shamanic course and now they can drum, now they can whistle, or do other things, but they don't know that these practices have been whitewashed. They've been usually taken from Native elders without any reciprocity, without authority from them. So they don't understand that they're still being complicit in that cultural theft. They don't even know that up until 1978, all of these practices were illegal. Our ancestors were jailed and murdered. They were killed for these practices. And now you feel that you're entitled to them without working for them, without earning the teachings. And that's really important. You've got to earn what you learn.
I love that.
That earning comes over decades, not in 2-week courses or a 7-week course or a 1-year course. And you don't get certificates. I don't have a single certificate. My certificate is my community's support. That's my certificate.
Oh, I just love this. And we're getting so much love right now in the chat. Everyone is thanking you for speaking this beautiful and very important truth in a time that, we really need this. Cultural appropriation is very real. We see it all over in many traditions, and certainly so much in this tradition. And as you know, Grace, and we'll be sharing with all of you all later on with our CHi communications, issues related to certification and licensing, for example, of healing practitioners, and the need to be very vocal from the First Nations and other communities about how they really feel about that. Because when you're coming from a healing tradition, where it's not about monetization and it's not about certification and things like that. We have to find a way to honor these practices in right way and in right relationship and as allies. So thank you for speaking that truth. And, I just want to share a personal experience actually that I had recently where I went to a sort of a Native American cultural gathering here. In South Carolina, where I live currently, right? And it was beautiful. And it was a time that people from that community invited the public to come and gather and learn. And so, we learned so much. And I remember sitting and watching the dancing in this case. There's just all this beautiful dancing that was taking place. And even for me, coming from a very rich heritage, tradition that I love and that I do feel very connected to, it was interesting because I felt myself sort of almost yearning because the culture is so beautiful. The practices are so beautiful, and each of these practices speak to our spirit, right? So let's own that when we are attracted to something, whether we perceive it to be in or out of our culture, we're attracted to it perhaps because it lifts our spirit. And as Westerners, we have to remember that doesn't mean we have to own it, that we don't, right? That we don't, it's okay to say, I can witness this. It's absolutely beautiful and it's not mine. And then, it was interesting. So I watched myself go through this process. And then later they invited us to come and do a friendship dance. Oh. And it was so emotional for me. I'll get emotional now just even talking about it, right? Because then to come into that space as an ally, as a true ally, to witness the beauty, of a tradition and all its richness and for all the reasons that you said, we cannot separate the cultural context of colonialism from this issue. We just cannot. And anyone who tries to do that, it's a total bypass. And we have to recognize that's a bypass. So you have to take all that in. And what's beautiful is that we can be touched by the beauty and wisdom of these practices as allies. We don't have to always be on the inside circle of everything to receive the benefit, right? And so I think it's important for all of us to learn that as we learn about our different traditions and we learn about our different cultures, that we can celebrate that and release the sense.
That should be the impetus for saying, oh, sorry.
No, that's it. Yeah, I just wanted to share that, reflection.
That's beautiful because I've had that feeling with other cultures as well, but I think in particular with Native cultures, because of the damage the harm that has been done by colonization, if you're not of that culture, if you love it so much, you appreciate it so much, the question should be, how can I support them? How can I support you? Ask that nation, I want to be an ally. How can I support you? What can I do from where I am at to support you? Are you doing language revitalization programs? How can I support that? Are you protecting your lands from developers? So can I go stand with you, behind you, as you stand there to face off against these developers because your ancestors are buried here and I'm going to stand with you. That's part of it.
I love that.
It's not about taking anymore. It's about, it's about showing compassion and love for each other and doing it in a way that supports one another without needing to take.
Yeah, thank you. That is so beautiful. And to bear witness to something that is beautiful, you shared with me that you were interested in actually sharing a practice with us today, right? That, that this is something that we get to enjoy and experience with you, right? Without having to need to, dive in and feel like we have to own it or experience it, that you and people of your tradition will sometimes decide that you would like to share practice with us, share something with us that maybe we can do. And that is appropriate for us to do. So thank you so much for that offer. And I'm wondering if you'd like to say more about this practice you want to share with us.
Yeah, and before I go into that, I want to say that many of us really do want to share with everyone. Our circles want to be open to everyone. And part of that, though, there has to be that trust that when you come into our circles, you're coming for help. You're not coming to copy. You're not coming to make notes about how you're going to take it into your energy healing practices, because that has happened to me and to other curanderas, where energy practitioners or other type of shamanic healers will make appointments for healing, but once they get there, it's obvious that they're there to pick up a new tool for their toolbox. So I would like to share with people with the understanding that what I shared, that you're going to use it for yourself, that you're going to use it with respect, that you're not going to change it arbitrarily, that you're not going to monetize it. One of the things that comes up a lot in groups, and that I've been writing about on my Facebook because I think it's really important, is Dia de Muertos. People love our holy days known as Dia de Muertos, Day of the Dead. And some people were saying, like, why are you writing about this? Why are you making it so public? The reason is because people are very disconnected from their ancestors. That's part of the problem that I'm seeing in this grasping at traditions that don't belong to you. If you were connected to your ancestors, if you were taught to respect and love your ancestors, you would want to learn about their practices. If your ancestors are from Ireland, beautiful tradition, beautiful, powerful healing traditions, start there. And they say, well, it's because I don't know, I want to honor my ancestors. I said, wonderful, let me show you how to do it and do it correctly. We want to share with you, but we want you to do it with the same love and respect that we have for our traditions. So when I share like the herbal bath, the full moon is coming up on Monday. So every month I remind the people on my Facebook page, on my social media, that it's time for them to purify themselves through either a ritual healing bath, and that those instructions, the recipe, if you will, is on my website. And maybe
Jason just posted it in chat. So for anybody who wants to see it, just click the link that Jason just posted in chat for the written version that Grace has provided us for the Limpia. And
it's there in English and in Spanish for those who want to share it with people who only read Spanish. But so if you don't want to spend a lot of time with the bathing, which I really recommend if you feel very burdened by worries, if you have had, trauma from COVID is real. The disconnection that many of us are feeling is very real. A certain impatience at times with ourselves and others because we feel the stress. If that feels very heavy for you, then instead of the moonlight limpia that I'm going to share with you for today, I really recommend that you take the time today to look at the herbal bath, because you have to gather things for it, and it's quite lengthy. So you prepare now for Monday.
Great. And Jason just posted that too, full moon plant medicine purification. So you've got 2 links there from Jason to check out both aspects of this purification process.
And so the moonlight limpia is very simple, and it's I like it because you can bring your family into this ritual. The moonlight purification meditation is on the full moon, or anytime that there's a lot of, that the grandmother moon is really shining brightly, is the good time to do it. You can start today. When the moon is, as high as above you as possible, you go outdoors if it's not cold. If it's very cold, like here in the Rockies, I will do it inside, but preferably outside, because you want the grandmother's light to flow over you. Culturally, we stand outside and we first offer tobacco. There's a lot of cultural protocols around offering tobacco that really need to be explained properly. So I recommend that if you're not familiar with the indigenous protocols, especially for women on handling tobacco, that you use another plant like mugwort, for example. You can use that for prayers. And you offer that plant medicine to the grandmother moon. And you stand and you speak to her. She's your grandmother. She loves you. She wants the best for you. She wants to light your path. So you stand under the light of the grandmother moon. You offer your prayers. And if you're in a circle with your family, I encourage you to have your children offer their prayers too in a circle. Go around the circle. And each one offer their prayer. It can be short. It can even be one word if someone is shy.
Mhm.
But you stand in that circle together, offering your prayers. And, just ask, Grandmother Moon, we thank you for your light. We thank you for that high spiritual light that flows through me and around me. I ask that your light remove from my body, mind, and spirit all inner and outer obstacles to my well-being. I ask that you light flow through every part of my body, inside and out, so that every part that is touched by your spiritual light be healed. I am willing to surrender my grief to you. I'm willing to surrender my doubts to you. I'm willing to surrender the connections that I have that are unhealthy to situations, friends, family members. I ask that you remove them and that your love bring us back together in happy and healthy ways so that we support one another and that our family can be whole and happy and harmonious in our relationships. Grandmother, I ask that you bless all our plant relatives, all our four-legged relatives. I ask that you bless all of our land and our water protectors, all those who are protecting our holy places, all those who are protecting the water, just like the water that runs through our body. This water is pristine. We ask that this water always flow for future generations. And so that's just an example. Use your own words. Sometimes people ask me, can you send me a prayer? And yes, I can send you a prayer, but the prayer has to come from your heart. The prayer has, and this is a conversation that you're having with the grandmother moon. You can even step aside if you're by yourself and just really talk to her, just say it in all whatever words you want. That's the important thing, is that you make that heart connection. And when you feel like you're done, you just say thank you. Thank you for all the blessings. And I offer these blessings also for the benefit of all our relations. And that's what you do. Right? And I'd like to also recommend that if you're in a group, either with friends or family, that after the moonlight meditation visualization, that you share food. That's really important.
Beautiful, yes.
Because, food is important to us. It's love. It's also for us, it's cultural food. So that's part of continuing that ceremony.
And you mean sharing food with each other in this case? Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I ask because sometimes in our traditions, we offer food to the moon and during certain rituals, not often, but sometimes.
Well, we do that too, but I want to keep it simple.
Yeah. Okay, great. Gosh,
yeah, you can.
Everyone is throwing out so much love and gratitude for sharing that practice. Thank you. They're all saying thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you all for your patience. We have many, many questions. We will not get through them all in the last 10 minutes, but I promise you that I will ask Grace if she will come back for us sometime as well. And we will also be putting the links to Grace's website and ways that you can be in contact with her for your continued learning with her as well. So Anne is asking, are you going to teach in San Diego again soon?
I sure hope so, because I miss teaching in person, but I do offer some classes through Zoom. I generally only share them with my subscriber list. So, subscribe to my email list and you'll get notices of when I teach these classes. The only one that I usually publicize on social media is my good relations class, how to be a good relative class, because I think that that's really important. And I encourage everyone to participate and ask questions. And I try to make it as safe as possible so that you can ask any question that you want to ask of me. And all my workshops are done on a donation basis, just like my healing work.
Great. And Jason just put in the chat a link to Grace's website, and I'm sure we'll put it in one more time before the end of the hour. Many questions. Here's a question from Elisa. Elisa, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Hi, Grace. I am a reconnecting Indigenous person, descendant of the Yoemi tribe. I would like to know if you have any advice for people who grew up disconnected from the traditions but are interested in reconnecting.
Yes, my Yoemia. We are very blessed that we have a lot of Yoeme relatives who are willing to share and are open to sharing with all of us to bring us back into our communities. One of my dear relatives, Olympia Beltran, has started a Yaquis of Southern California, a nonprofit of which I'm the treasurer this year. It's brand new. And I encourage you to go to our Facebook page. We are connecting with other Yoemia here in the United States. And we are going to be offering some pláticas on culture. There's language classes that are free that are offered on Zoom by Maestro Cesar Barreras. I encourage you to attend them. Usually we have that information also on the Yaquis of Southern California Facebook page. That's where you should start. That's where you should start. We'll be giving more resources there, and we welcome everyone to learn the language, whether you're Yaqui or you're not. But definitely, we want to encourage all of our Yoemia to come and reconnect with our culture, to reconnect with our language. I'm learning the language along with everybody else. So, you'll feel welcomed.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for that. And I know she appreciates it as well. Karen has an interesting question. She wants to know if you can talk about the differences between creation light and sustaining light, or particle energy and divine light. I don't know if any of that rings a bell for you.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
And then there are several questions about whether you work with the elements or not, and how, if you do, in your practice.
I'm not sure what you mean by the elements.
In this case, earth, water, air, fire, ether is what they are talking.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I think that is also a connection that we have across cultures. Mm-hmm. We were in England a few years ago, and I connected with a beautiful woman who's very much a part of her culture there. And we talked about the elements and how that works. For them, it's a magic system. Ours, we call it medicine. So the medicine that I had, the tobacco, the sage, earth, right? Mm-hmm. On my altar, I always have water. I have gopal burning when I'm doing my prayers. The flowers, of course, also represent our spiritual world, the earth world, especially in the Yaqui tradition. Flowers are very important to us. So I have flowers. There's other elements on my altar that are important to me in my path. So yes, I do work with the elements in that way, that I honor the elements because we are the elements are in us. Mm-hmm. And so we're that micro and macrocosm, right? So in honoring the elements, we honor ourselves. There's that interconnectedness, there's the interdependence, and there's the reciprocity. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were asking me, but I hope that helped a little bit.
I love that. And I love what you just mentioned about the interdependence and reciprocity relates to a question that Joyce asked about, can you comment on the bonding community of people, plants, and animals who live depending on each other, and, how that fits into what you do. And I think you've just described that pretty well, right?
Absolutely, because part of the reciprocity and generosity is not only monetary. It's the reciprocity, like I think I mentioned earlier, it's the reciprocity that I hold for any guardian when I travel. Before I travel, I always offer prayers and I put down offerings for the spirits of the land. If we went to Iceland a few years ago where I did a presentation and my husband was teaching, and I did my usual where I made offerings and I said prayers to the guardians of the air, guardians of the earth, of the water, and particularly to the guardians of place for Iceland. Mm-hmm. And that night I had a dream of these unusual looking dolphins, and they were very excited to see me. And I thought that was really interesting. So I remembered what they looked like. So I did a Google search, and those dolphins were from Iceland in that area. Oh, so I knew that those guardians had heard my prayers and were already welcoming me to their sacred land. That's reciprocity. That's being a good relative. And that's also, honoring the way back relations and connections that we probably all have way back. And so when we do that, we're honoring them, we honor ourselves, we're honoring your ancestors, their ancestors, my ancestors. And I hope that in doing that, that's also bringing healing to the ancestors.
I love
and
that.
Hoping that ripples out to us.
I love that. And it so relates to Margaret's question, which is, would you consider that at some level we're all global relatives, right? And I think you just Absolutely. Gave an example of how you can be a good relative and how you can facilitate reciprocity and how you get that knowing back when you made contact in that way. I mean, what a beautiful experience you just shared with us. Mm-hmm. Grace, thank you so much for this hour. It's just been fantastic. I know, y'all, there are some questions about, can I get this replay later? Yes, absolutely. This is freely available. This is part of the work of our social profit or nonprofit collaborative, the Consciousness and Healing Initiative. And by way of our abilities to facilitate reciprocity, we are able to have this freely available to everyone for the next 48 hours. So all weekend, feel free to watch this again, feel free to share it with friends. And in that spirit of reciprocity, the reason that we can do these things is because we have an incredible staff that works really hard in organizing and facilitating these events, along with, of course, the very deep generosity of our presenters. So if this really calls to you and you want to dive in and learn more about the different healing traditions, the science behind the healing traditions, I encourage you to look at becoming a CHi contributor. It's super easy. Jason is going to pop into the chat how you can become a contributor. You simply go to chi.is/join. When you do that, you'll not only be supporting us to be able to continue to have these webinars for the community, you'll get all access to every single webinar we've done, and there are about 50 of them with so many leaders in the healing space. It's just an incredible treasure trove for your own well-being and your own learning. And I won't share too much now, but we have some really fantastic offerings that are coming up soon for all of you, and CHi contributors are going to get an amazing discount to that. So it's just our way of saying thank you, and we invite you also to support in this movement toward global healing. Once again, Grace, if people would like to be in contact with you directly, what are the best ways to learn more from you?
You can just sign up for my email list or contact me through info@curanderismo.org. Just go to my website and click on the contact tab. It'll take you to a form, or just send me an email.
Okay. That's wonderful. Well, wishing you all well. Thank you for all joining us today, being wonderful allies and relatives, listening to this very deep and beautiful and valuable and very important conversation with Grace. More to come, I hope. And thank you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Thank you.